everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. This week I am going to be finishing up on my sort of like history bounding winter coat project, which I am wearing part of right here. We are starting this project off right where we left off from last week's video. So if you have not seen last week's video, I would definitely recommend going and checking that out. I will leave a link down in the description. But in that video, I go through all of like the mock-up process and figuring out the fit of the coat. And now it's time to like really put all of the pieces together. So obviously I already have the exterior pieces put together right here. So I need to now put together the lining pieces, or re-put together the lining pieces again, which I am making out of the floral mock-up cotton sateen fabric. And once that is done, then it will be time to also pay attention to sleeves and hood, and then I can do the finishing of, you know, buttons and buttonholes and the hem. So hopefully we can get everything done this week. I mean, I'm determined. I'm going to get everything done this week. It's a much lighter week otherwise, other than sewing, so fingers crossed that everything goes swimmingly. But I'm very excited to be able to wear this coat hopefully very soon, because we are getting some cold weather and potential snow coming in this week, and it would be so fun to take finished pictures in the snow, since that is a rarity here for Western Washington. So I'm going to dive right in by putting together the lining pieces, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at sleeves. So for the most part, I have been ignoring the actual sewing instructions from the pattern, but I was just pulling them out to see what it said about like inserting the lining to the jacket. And I read it literally several times at where that point in the instructions should be about, you know, creating a lining. Nothing at all. So finally I started from the beginning to see what it said. And oddly enough, even though this is a coat, which coats are always bag lined, as far as I know, like all coats, even in history, are bag lined, because I actually have an extant jacket. It's like a velvet jacket that is from around the turn of the century, and it is bag lined as well. And yet this pattern actually calls for you to flatline, not bag line. I don't know why, but yeah, it has you flatline all of the pieces except for the fronts, and then the fronts basically, because it's like both sides wool, it gets turned in, and you put bias tape alongside the edges and then like hand stitch the bias tape down to the flat lining of like the second piece. That makes no sense to me, because again, this is a coat. Coats are bag lined. So I'm gonna have to ignore the instructions on that front as well and just figure out like what to do. I think honestly probably I'm gonna look at another coat pattern and see what that one tells me to do, because obviously this one's not gonna help me out on how the lining should best go in. Okay, so I just pulled out my Simplicity 8262, which is what my old blue winter coat was based on, and it has you actually put the wool sleeve in with like the wool jacket part before you attach the lining, which makes a lot of sense to me. And then it really just has like, you sew all of the lining pieces together, and then you sew the front edges, and then you turn it right sides out. And there is something funky that goes on with like how the sleeve lining works with that, but I will get to that when we get to that, because that's like almost the last step. But otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna keep putting together the lining, and then I'll just kind of put it to the side until I'm done with the sleeve. The other thing that is kind of awesome with like pulling out the instructions from this pattern, speaking of sleeves, is that I found the mock-up or the pattern that I used from my sleeve for the coat, so that is pretty awesome. And then also I actually found the hood pattern that I'd used as well, so that is fantastic. Now my hood is a little large on my blue coat, like it's not super functional because it has a gorgeous fairy tale effect, but that means that if the wind blows it this way, it just falls off, and it means that if I lean forward, it falls completely over my face and completely covers my face. So I am going to double check this to see if this really is like the hood and I didn't make any changes to it. And if so, I'm going to need to make it a little bit smaller because I love the look of it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the same because like, look at this. It makes this big fairy tale hood. I love the look of it, but it is not particularly practical. So I'm very grateful that I found this though, because then I don't have to start from scratch at least. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use this sleeve pattern. The one in the McCalls pattern is a puffed sleeve, which I kind of liked the idea of for that sort of history bounding aspect. Plus it hopefully will allow me to easier wear puffed sleeves inside the coat, because I do find like I can't really wear, for example, my 1890s sweater that I had made a couple years ago. I can't wear that inside the blue coat. There's just not enough room in the sleeve. So yeah, I might go ahead and do the puffed one. I definitely want to mock this up, but otherwise I'm glad to have that. And yeah, I'm going to keep putting everything together. So one other thing that I am playing with, I guess, is the fact that this front section of the lining is supposed to be like interfaced with, it seems, a fusible according to the pattern instructions. I don't have any fusible interfacing, and in fact I don't think I have enough even just regular interfacing. One thing that I do have though is this, like, I think this is sew-in lightweight hair canvas. Like, it's very malleable, as you can see, but I do have a lot of it, and so I wonder if it would be worth, you know, flatlining it maybe to the front facing pieces and seeing what that does. I think it's just supposed to give you some heft and structure underneath the buttonholes. So I think I'll go ahead and give that a try and see how it goes. So I figured that since I had my jacket and hood on with my blue coat, that I would go ahead and actually start with the hood instead of the sleeves. For one thing, when I pulled this pattern out yesterday, I was a little bit confused as to why there was like a strip piece that said hood center and then the other part of the hood. And it's because I completely forgot that there is actually a strip in this hood. Do you see that? So like there's a strip here and it goes to the back. I had originally played with the idea when I made this coat of making like an 18th century shaped hood, and then I decided I didn't want that. A, because you would have like, I guess, you know, a tiny potential of airflow through the back, but B, I don't know, I just decided against it, I guess. And so I went with this shape to give myself this fairy tale look. But again, this is really not practical. And it also just, like, when you have it open, it just kind of sinks, you know, it doesn't like stay up and open, which again, it's not practical because it stays away from your head. So I just figured I would take a look at like the hood pattern that I have here and see, is it exactly, you know, what I have going on here if I hold it up to the seams. And yeah, it looks like this is, I mean, I'll take this off and double check, but it looks like this is the size of the pattern. So I'm kind of thinking that what I need is like just to take out, I don't know, even just like 1.5 inches on each side, make it a little bit shorter like this maybe, because I feel like this is more functional. I mean, I think that this flat part has been working to avoid, you know, any sort of pointiness in the hood. And again, it has a nice shape back here. Like, I don't mind the height, length, whatever that would be, of it like this. It's just the width that is a little impractical. And though then again, I guess it is that makes it go like this. I don't know. To be honest, I don't wear the hood a lot, but I really like how the hood looks when it's all full too. I have to think about this because I do like the shape of this hood, but it's impractical. Okay, so I was playing around with this hood in the mirror and like folding it back and stuff and trying to see, you know, how far it would fall over my head, that sort of thing. Even though there is still more excess back here, because of the shape of the hood here, because of the curve, it's really not falling forward over my head any more than this. And yes, I'm sure that this looks very weird on camera. So with this much folded up out of the way, I can still see if it falls forward, and also it gives a little brim to protect my face. So I'm kind of thinking that I want to just remove, I think that's about 1.5 inches, remove about 1.5 inches of it there, and also remove about 1.5 inches here, because if I like pinch some out of the way, then it makes it to a point where it doesn't catch wind. So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. Just remove 1.5 inches from like this part of the pattern. So, you know, cut that bit off, and then also from this bottom part of the pattern, just cut that bit off, keeping the curve as is, and obviously taking the amount off of this strip as well, but we'll go with that for the hood pattern. I have been working on the hood, which right now I feel like looks very strange, but basically what you do is you seam together each like side piece of the hood, each inner versus outer of the hood. In my case, I made them all in wool. I know some people prefer to do like a lining, like a contrast, or maybe a different fabric or something in the same color, but I like it when it is just wool. For one thing, a slippery hood is going to fall off your head really easily. So the wool helps to stay on your head, even though it does not help your hair. But for two, I just feel like it has a nicer look when it's like draping in the back too. So this is my Little Red Riding Hood, but I seamed together these 3 pieces and these 3 pieces, and then I've done the outer seam right here. I have now, well, I pressed the other seams before doing this one, but I've now pressed this seam, which means that I can turn this right sides out and then again press alongside this whole seam right here. I'm probably gonna clip my seam intersections just because they're a little bit thick, so I'll probably clip the corners there, but I will press here, and once I've pressed there, I will basically have my hood here. And then the side of the hood will get pleated up so that it can fit the neckline of the coat. So that is the next step, and I will be able to attach it to the coat, which is hanging out underneath the coat lining. This is the coat lining all connected here, so you can see the facing, and really this would wind up being like this against the body so that this part goes against the inside of the wool outer. And the one other thing that I did on this that I hadn't mentioned was I did sew all of my pleats in place. I actually decided to sew these by machine on the lining. I still have to whip stitch them by hand on the outer, but I just felt like it really doesn't matter if you see one tiny little row of stitching right here that is by machine. It's the inside of a coat. It doesn't matter. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this hood up, get it attached to the coat itself, and then we can start on the sleeves. So as I was looking at how the hood attached to my blue coat here, I realized that I have a facing in this coat along the back of the neck. Now the front, of course, has a facing like I had mentioned maybe in the last video where it's like narrower, it's not the full piece. This one, it is the full piece, but I realized I didn't have any facing at all in the neck. So I've actually just gone and cut a shape that is the back of these 2 pieces put together here and just follows along like, I don't even know how wide it is. I literally just eyeballed, and then I pressed up this edge right here. Now I'm going to baste along these edges. I undid the shoulder seams partially so that I can put this into the shoulder seam, and since this doesn't fray and since it's all going to be encased, I'm just going to baste along those, and then I'm going to do a tiny little stitch on the machine right along the edge of this piece right here. I've just finished hand stitching these pleats in the back. These are all like double box pleats, like there's multiple layers in there, so they're quite thick. Unfortunately, the one thing about like having this portion of the jacket unlined as opposed to having a flat lining is that I do feel like the stitches are still really obvious, if not more obvious than machine sewing, from the back. So this was all the hand sewing, and yeah, this is the outside of the jacket, and I feel like it looks really ugly. Like maybe I should have just machine sewed it, but also it's so thick, I don't know if machine sewing even would have really worked. I'm hoping that like when it has some chance to kind of air, that it can maybe hopefully like poof out around the stitches, because yeah, right now it is not my favorite. I have just put the coat so far on with the hood to check kind of like where the edges of the hood should go to. On my old jacket, they go to basically everywhere except for where the button section overlaps, and it looks like that will be good for this one as well. So I just want to double check that and also kind of double check the size of the hood. I really like it. I think that this gives me definite like Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale vibes with still being much more practical than the other one. Like I don't feel like this would really, yeah, it's really not going to fall forward much at all. Like I can still see out of that and it'll give me some extra coverage, you know, if it's raining or whatever. And it looks good around here. It doesn't seem like it'll catch too much wind. So yeah, I just have to figure out, I'm going to go back to the pattern, I think, to double check what the overlap is. And then I will go ahead and put the hood on, pleating it up along the edges to match the neckline of the jacket. So I've been comparing the sleeve pattern for this actual pattern with the one that I used last time. This is one of two pieces. Oddly enough, I can't find the second piece that goes with the right size, so I have the other one that's smaller and I'll have to size it up anyway. But one of the things that I noticed is that the pink one that I used last time is actually longer from like armpit down. Once you flatten this out, it's still about an inch longer. So even though this looks taller overall, I do need to increase the length of, I guess, maybe the lower sleeve. I don't know if I need to also increase the upper sleeve length or not. I mean, this one is supposed to have a puff. The one I did last time did not have a puff. So I do need that, but yeah, I am going to size this up to a size 24 as well. So I have my sleeve mock-ups attached now, obviously, and there's a few things that I want to talk about. One, this is ridiculous. This is so much puff. There's no way I am not doing this much puff. That is just out of the question. The other part is that I'm noticing that my shoulders are still too wide. So I'm pretty certain that even if this was like buttoned all the way closed, do you see how far off my shoulder this is sitting and this is sitting? It should be like another ½ inch up the shoulder, which probably explains the gathering on this sleeve here. This actually, I know it's inside out, but this fits exactly into my other coat. And I wound up having to gather it quite a bit into this coat. And I think it's because my arm size is small because it's not cut up high enough. So I do have to bring the arm size up a little bit, but even doing that won't take most of that poof out, unfortunately. I love the idea of a little bit of poof, like maybe a little bit more than this one. Not that. So this is the sleeve that is fitting better in general. One other note about this sleeve that I guess I don't remember, but it was a long time ago that I made it, is this was like my sleeve mock-up for it, but I think I actually tapered out some fullness in the top because there was a little wedge in the pattern that I noted, like, remove this wedge. Now for that other coat, I wanted it to be an exact fit. Again, I don't mind like some gathering in this sleeve. So what I think I'm actually gonna do is put the wedge back in, let it give it some of this little bit of gathering here. So that way I won't lose the gathering when I widen or open up the arm's eye a little bit by moving it up my shoulder. So I cut this much off of this sleeve here, the sleeve head, and I think it is much, much better now. I do think that the sleeve itself maybe is pulling right here. Like it just seems like it, see those little wrinkles? It just seems like it's pulling. So I think that this needs to have the sleeve head increased upwards by just a tiny bit, but otherwise it's feeling pretty decent. My one other caveat is that I had cut this sleeve with the intention of having like a 2-inch fold under for the inside of the sleeve, like to create kind of a sort of self-facing, and it is not there. As you can see, this is basically, well, maybe you can't see, but it's basically like where the sleeve should end, maybe a ½ inch longer. So I'm definitely going to need to lengthen this considerably down at the hem. But other than that, and this little bit right here, I think it's pretty good. I think that the gathers are decent. I had kind of wanted like a little bit more, but not really enough to like continue playing with the sleeve, basically. So I might do a tiny slash and spread and just widen the top of the sleeve cap like a tiny bit, but not enough to really like affect the fit or anything. The rest of the fit all the way through is quite good. I am wearing my gunny sack dress underneath, so I have puff sleeves inside the sleeve right now. And in fact, this sleeve, it's getting hung up on it down here because this is a narrower sleeve right here. But this one is fitting really nicely, and I don't think it's looking too bulky for a coat either. Also, it's so nice trying on a coat where you don't have to take off what you're wearing. You just put it on over. That's really peachy. So yeah, I think that I'm okay with cutting this out in the wool, making those kind of small changes to the length and up here. Do you have to figure out what to use as lining? I think I want something like smooth. So I might use the red matte satin as the lining, which I showed you in the last video. It's this. I think that it will work decently for a coat lining. Like, I would love to have something that won't feel cold if I'm wearing like a 3/4 sleeve under the coat, because I do that sometimes. And this would feel cold, but I don't really feel like I have anything else. I don't have any more of, well, I don't have any more of that sateen that would match, at least not enough to cut sleeves out of. I have tiny little scrap pieces. I could use the Bemberg rayon that I used on my blue jacket, but I just feel like it's kind of weird to have blue sleeve lining. Of course, I'm having a floral body lining, so maybe it's not that weird. But I do like this because it doesn't really feel cold, but it's still pretty slick. Though that said, now that I'm actually feeling the two together, this actually feels colder. So maybe I'll just stick with the matte satin and go that route. So first off, it is amazing how brown my red wool looks compared to the red matte satin. I just think that's pretty incredible since it looked so red before. But what I'm showing you here is actually that I decided to cut the satin lining shorter than the wool, because the wool is going to be turned up around that. So basically both of these are going to be put together as sleeves, and the seams are going to be inside the two layers. And then yeah, this is going to be turned up around that with this top part most likely tucked in. I realized that I didn't actually do that on my other coat, but I did cut this long enough that I should be able to tuck the little edge in and press it and then whip stitch that to the lining. So that's how the sleeves are going to go together, so there's no exposed seams. And then once they're both together, they're going to be set into the outer wool layer. Then the lining can cover up this seam as well. So I totally lied about how you do the sleeves. You actually set the lining sleeves into the lining and the outer sleeves into the outer, and then you put everything together. I looked at my blue coat and realized that that's what was happening, because otherwise you'd get like probably weirdly lumpy seams. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking there, but this is definitely the way to do it. Now that this one is done and this one is done, I get to join them together and put the lining into the outer. So the way that I'm going to do that is basically I am going to take the front edges here and the neckline, and I'm going to put, well, let's see, it would be right sides. Yeah, it is right sides together. Yeah, because the right side of this is this side, even though this will wind up being against the body. Sorry for all of the clashing reds. There's a lot going on here. But yeah, so it's right sides together, and I'll just seam it up there along the neckline all the way down here. Then I'll figure out how to do the sleeve fold around the edge of the sleeve, and I'll be leaving the hem to last. Now, obviously that means that I still have to do the buttons and buttonholes. Today I ran to Joann's and I picked up just some like black fancy buttons, but also a cover button kit, both that are 1 1/8 inch in diameter for the buttons. They didn't have any large red buttons, especially nothing that would like match the shade of red, but literally no large ones at all. And so that's why I went with the black. But then I kind of love the idea of covered buttons. I think that look really pretty, but covered buttons never seem to last. And this is something that is obviously going to get a ton of wear. So that's why I got both, because I'm just not sure what would be better. And I guess I'll see also what I have time for, because ideally I would actually like to wear this coat tomorrow. Rachel and Emily and I are going to this like big Christmas lights thing. We're leaving probably around 3:30. It is just about midnight now. I'm probably gonna go ahead and do the lining situation now, but probably leave like the buttons and buttonholes till tomorrow. So ideally, I'd like to get that done, and obviously I need to do the hem, but it's entirely possible that I might go tomorrow without the hem done. We'll see what I manage. So I'm gonna get back to work on this, and yeah, keep your fingers crossed for me. My lining is in. Ta-da! I am loving how this looks, though I am a little concerned that like the regular button overlap, it just feels like it's going to be a little bit large. I mean, I know I need room for like a sweater and stuff, which I'm not wearing right now. So hopefully, you know, that will allow that room, but still allow it to be flattering. Because yeah, right now I feel like it wants to overlap like humongous. Oh God, it really is. Oh my gosh. Okay, the overlap is like to here between my fingers, but that's if it's fitted entirely. Obviously, the button overlap is not supposed to be that big. It's supposed to be like here. So I hope that that will still be flattering enough on me. But yeah, I have to do sleeve ends, and as I mentioned, the hem is going to be the last thing, which the hem, you can't see it, but it is definitely dipping down, I think specifically on the sides, like this seam where the pocket is, this one seems like it's a little longer. It is longer in the back as well, but this side seam in specifically I think has fallen out on like the bias. So yeah, it's funny how long these sleeves are. But these should be pretty easy to just like turn up so that they're on the inside of the satin lining, and then to have another turn in there and then just stitch that by hand. I think that that will be pretty easy to do. And yeah, I need the buttons and buttonholes. I just pressed this, so it's like doubly warm right now. It's hot from the iron, and then it's also definitely thicker than my blue coat. And I think that's because it has the cotton sateen lining as opposed to the Benberg rayon. But I do really like the look of it. There's the back so far. And of course, we have the hood. Look at that hood. I'm liking this a lot. So yeah, I'm gonna do buttons and buttonholes in the morning. I might go ahead and just like mark them now, and then I'll actually do them in the morning. It does seem, no, actually, yeah, I can close this. I was worried it was actually tight at the neckline, but it actually feels way more comfortable at the neckline than my blue coat, which really is quite tight. So that is excellent. So yeah, I've got to mark all the buttons and buttonholes. I need to remind myself which way it goes which. I can never remember just off the top of my head. Like I have to go look at garments, other garments, and figure out which way is supposed to go on top. But I'm really liking this, and I hope that I can get to wear it tomorrow. So I marked my buttonholes on the coat. I'm doing them every 3 7/8 inches, and then they start 7/8 of an inch away from the edge of the coat, which is how that part says on the pattern. The spacing is not at all right though. And I've decided, hopefully, to do the covered buttons. It was a lot of effort to get even one done. Like they did not want to press. I was actually thinking I might even have to like go return the kit. It's your typical Dritz kit. I wound up putting a book under it, which I always do because that gives me a harder surface on my table. And then I tried various things to get it to like actually press in. What wound up working was to take this mallet, lean my entire body weight on top of the mallet to press the little blue doohickey into the button thing. That finally worked. Hopefully it will actually stay because these buttons are always notorious for breaking, but I really liked the look of the covered button as opposed to, these are the black buttons that I bought. They're just a little too small for a contrast button. Like these are smaller buttons than I have on my blue coat, which I did not realize, even though I was wearing my blue coat at the time. I don't know why I didn't realize that, but yeah. Whereas these, I think like when you take a button cover kit and you cover it, I swear it winds up actually larger than that because of the fabric or something like that covering. I don't know, because they're both 1 1/8 inch. But it just looked prettier. So I marked my buttonholes, like I said, and then I was like, well, it's just chalk marking. What if it fades away, shakes off, etc. by tomorrow? even though it's 1:15 in the morning, I might as well just do them now. So I just did a tester. It's definitely one where you like really have to walk the machine. Like you have to help steer a lot because this is dense, and I'm a little bit worried because like where I'm actually stitching on the coat, it's even more than just 2 layers of the wool because it has the hair canvas in there. So hopefully this will work okay. I was also concerned that this button wouldn't actually fit in the largest size of the buttonhole foot and that I'd have to like do it by manually by hand, like a 4-step button instead of a 1-step button. But it does fit through. Ta-da! So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead with this and I'm gonna go do the buttonholes. There's only like 7 of them, I think. I marked that every 3 7/8 inch. I determined that measurement by putting the top button in its place and like marking there, and then seeing what was the happiest medium where I wanted one here and one at my waist, and I kind of squidged a little so that it'd be even, and that wound up being 7 3/4 inches. So then I just divided that in half, wound up with 3 7/8. So that's where they are, and then they go down to basically about like fingertip length on the jacket, because I figure like any lower than that I'd have to bend and get into a weird thing of like actually doing it up, so it didn't make sense to go lower. If I need them lower, I can add them in the future. But yeah, this will also give me the chance of making a couple of spare buttons in this kit of 10, at least as long as I can actually make the buttons. But that way, if some of them break, I have other buttons to sew on, which is what I always like to do with these covered button kits. So I'm gonna go do my buttonholes, and I will leave the button making for tomorrow. So naturally my buttonholer decided to malfunction all over the place. So like if you look at this one right here, this is the worst one. It literally just decided to not sew this entire side of the buttonhole, doing like the zigzag across. So I'm gonna have to go back and do that manually. This one broke the thread partway through, so that's what that little bobble is right there. This one skipped a little bit down there, so I'll have to go back in with that one. And then these top ones I had done as the keyhole style, but if you look at this end, it just didn't do an end. So I'm gonna have to go back and do the ends manually on there. The rest of them I then switched to the regular plain buttonhole style, but obviously they need some work. Oh, but I did win at Thread Chicken, and I took off my bobbin that has the matching thread to that. So there's a plain red bobbin down in the bottom. This is like an old vintage thread, you can tell by the spool, but I want all the buttons on front to look the same, so I've saved the bobbin so that I can do the fixes. I have all of my buttonholes done now. There are 8 in total. One of them is definitely a little janky, but hopefully it's not that obvious. Right now I'm not even finding it. Oh, it's this one. The one right at the waist. That's the janky one. Great. But yeah, hopefully it won't be too obvious once it has a button through it. Luckily that one is always going to be buttoned, so like it'll always be covered up with a button, so that's good. But yeah, those are all done, and I will make the other 7 plus at least 1 spare buttons tomorrow and sew them on, fix these, and ideally do the hem all before about 3:30. All of my buttons are now on all the way down. I did curve it so that like the buttons here at the waist are a lot farther from the edge than like the buttons at the top and the bottom, so that it will bring in the waist a little bit. I know it looks kind of odd when it's open, but generally I always wear my coat closed, at least at the waist, so I think that that will be good. And yeah, I'm really liking the look. Now it's time to do the sleeves. So for the sleeves, my plan on how to do this is to like take it off, put the sleeves inside out, and then basically just tuck the sleeves over, the wool sleeves over the satin sleeves, press it, and press again on the edge, and then just hand sew it. So hopefully that'll work. The sleeve hems are all done, and I've run out of time to do the hem before we head out today, so let me show you what the coat looks like. Look, even these giant poofy sleeves fit in my new coat. I'm very excited to head out to our Christmas festival, and I'm going to take you with us. So overall, I am so pleased with how this coat came out. I do still need to do the hem. The one thing that I did before I left today for our little like festival events thing was that I did serge off a little bit of the lining hem just so it could hang fine, because like this doesn't fray, the outer, the wool, and so it could hang fine and no one would see the lining. And so that actually worked really well. Like part of me wonders if I should even attach the coat to the lining because it worked so well. My plan though is to fold up the exterior over the interior and then whip stitch that in place just to give it a nice hem, but it seems like I don't necessarily have to, which is cool. But that's probably what I'm gonna do tomorrow after editing this video. So yeah, overall it worked great. I loved doing the wool in the pockets. Like that's a game changer. My hands were so cozy in my pockets. So I'm definitely gonna do that on all future like winter wear. The coat was very heavy to carry when I was walking around inside at the festival, but it did keep me really nice and warm the entire time outside, even though it was below 30 degrees. So that was really great. I forgot to bring my scarf, and even without the scarf, like buttoning it up all the way, I did feel nice and cozy. I am also wearing my 1890s bicycle type sweater that I made a couple years ago. I will link to that video down below if you're interested in how to make an 1890s style bicycle sweater out of knit fabric, but I did wear that, so my neck was warm because of that as well. But yeah, I'm very pleased with this. I am definitely going to be wearing this all the freaking time. So happy. I do kind of look like I stepped out of a Hallmark movie, but you know what? I am okay with that. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks right here on YouTube. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Guardian level patrons, Sharon, Mirage, and Laura. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!